And for more than 2 decades, a football Sunday was not complete without watching John Madden and Pat Summerall. And coming next week, the release of a new book examining their rise to the #1 broadcast team in television. Still, as Rich Podolsky, the author, describes in this book, this pairing almost did not happen. Rich, when we look at this book, what inspired you to write it at this time, given that John and Pat haven't been on the air for so long?
Well, I worked with both of those guys at CBS Sports back in the 70s and early 80s. And I had written a book that came out 4 years ago called You Are Looking Live, which was about the history and the innovation of the NFL Today, the first pregame show to ever go live. And that did fairly well. There were a lot of backstories and inside scoop and backstabbing that I revealed. And people really seemed to enjoy that. I was having lunch with an ex-colleague, Janice Nelson, who contributed a lot to both books because she was at both CBS and Fox. And she said she wanted to write a Substack because she had a lot of Summerall and Madden stories to tell. And I said, well, you ought to write a book instead. And she said, oh, I can't write a book. She encouraged me to write the book. And I thought about it for a little bit, and I knew there were a couple people I really would need to get in touch with. And when I found out I could talk with them, I decided to go forward with the research, and it turned out pretty well.
It did indeed. Did you meet any resistance in telling this story at all, or were all the parties pretty eager to put this in your pages?
Everybody was very helpful and cooperative. There were a few things that way near the end of the book, when we talk about the problems Pat Summerall had on the air due to a brain disease that wasn't revealed until almost after his death, and his drinking. Was anyone really reluctant? And I just pulled out the line. Look, it was over 40 years ago. Nobody's alive anymore. Why don't you just tell me what happened?
In reading the book, I get this, that the greatest pairing, arguably in sports television history, almost didn't happen. It was really because of a partying lifestyle of another broadcast team that really was the genesis for all of this. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Pat Summerall had 6 great years with Tom Brookshier, and as the play-by-play guy before that, and they were the #1 team not only at CBS but in the country. They were loved and revered. And they would party together on and off the field, and that was part of the problem. They got in too much trouble, especially the week of the Super Bowl in 1979-80 season. And they got the first time they ever got really bad reviews for the game. And the new president of CBS Sports, a guy named Van Gordon Sauter, came in and he decided he didn't want to put up with the drinking episodes that kept coming back to him and the escapades. And he said, I'm going to split them up. And so his new executive producer, Terry O'Neill, said, well, who do you want? And he said, well, I want this guy, John Madden, to be my analyst, my #1 analyst. And O'Neill said, he's only been with CBS 2 years, and there hasn't been a game that he's done that's gone back to New York. Have you seen any of his games on tape? And Van Gordon Sauter said, oh, no. But I know he's the guy. Well, how do you know he's the guy? I've seen him 30 seconds at a time in the Miller Lite commercials. And believe me, he's a raconteur. He could entertain anyone.
Excuse me. I'm not the same crazy coach who used to storm around the sidelines yelling at the officials. I've learned to relax, and I drink light beer from Miller. Do you know that Light's got a third less calories than a regular beer? And listen to this. Light doesn't fill me up. Besides that, Light tastes fantastic. Oh, sure, there are a lot of other beers around, and you can drink any one you want. But let me tell you this.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
As I was saying, I don't care what anybody else...
And those were the first commercials he did for Miller Lite, where he came bursting through the wall, sidling up to the bartender and saying, "Tastes great." Madden really had a tremendous personality, and his big problem the first two seasons as a broadcaster was being able to fit in all his stories in between the end of the play and the start of the next play, so the play-by-play guy could set up the situation, so-and-so split to the right, so-and-so in the backfield, etc. He had his problems no matter who he worked with. He really didn't become the John Madden we know and love until the middle of the '81 season when he started working with Pat Summerall. And that was because Pat Summerall gave himself up, and he gave John Madden the room to do all the storytelling he wanted. And when he went too far, Summerall would jump in and take him off the ledge.
John, though, had his reservations about going into broadcasting because I think it's easy for people in television to turn to ex-players and coaches, but I think sometimes we figure out that A, it's not as easy as it appears to be, and B, sometimes these people really don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, John coached for 10 years from age 32 to 42, and he won a Super Bowl, and he went to the AFC Championship with the Raiders 7 times. He was a hell of a great coach, but the bleeding ulcers got to him, and he had to give it up. And when asked to go and work as a broadcaster, he told his family that he said, "Nah, those guys, they're a bunch of hairdos." He hated Howard Cosell. He thought he was just a pompous ass. And he thought a lot of the broadcasters not only didn't do their homework, but got a lot of the information wrong, and he didn't want to be associated with them. So when Barry Frank, the great agent at IMG, went to John and said, "CBS wants to offer you 4 or 5 games for the '79 season." And John said, "I don't know, maybe in a few years." Well, instead of taking that for an answer, Barry Frank said, "You know, in a few years, they might not want you." And John thought about it and said, "I might as well give it a try. Might never have another chance." And after he did a game or two, he knew that he wanted to be a broadcaster, but he couldn't figure out how to be an analyst. And nobody at CBS was really helping him. He was working it out on his own, and they put him with a different play-by-play guy each game and a different producer and director, and that sure didn't help either. And his 4th game, oddly enough, was with Pat Summerall by accident, because Brookshier took the Thanksgiving Sunday off. His daughter was coming out in Philadelphia, and they needed to fill somebody in. They gave him Madden, and Madden was sweating bullets at the start of the game, even before the game. And Summerall thought, Jesus, if he's sweating now, this guy's never going to make it. Well, he was sweating because he was claustrophobic, and they were standing out on a ledge at Tampa Stadium doing the opening for the game. Summerall thought Madden showed promise in that game, but I watched that game on YouTube, and Madden said some interesting things, but he certainly wasn't the John Madden we all got to know, with the sound effects and the boom and the great ability to coach both teams on the field at the same time better than they were being coached on the field. John still had a long way to go, and there was a lot of CBS executives who thought, we don't need to bring him back. He's no better than anybody else. Maybe we should try another ex-coach. And then something happened the week of the Super Bowl. CBS hosted a big luncheon for the TV arts and sciences people. Madden was on the dais along with Brent Musburger, Pete Rozelle, George Allen, and Hank Stram. Now, those were three Super Bowl winning coaches, all working for CBS. And what happened was somebody threw it open to the audience for a question. And the question was, would any of you guys go back to coaching? George Allen, Hamden Hawden didn't answer. Hank Stram, who was number two, working with Scully at that time, said how happy he was. And Madden was last. Instead of just sitting there and giving a glib answer, he stood up, walked to the other end of the dais behind the chairs, put his hand on Pete Rozelle's shoulder from behind, squeezed it, and said, you know, people ask me all the time what I think about NFL officiating. And he had this big grin on his face. Rozelle started to crack up. And the audience of 500 broadcasters and advertisers and media people were all laughing. At that point, John Madden went into a 5-minute routine that had the place in stitches. And at the end of the routine, the CBS executives got together in the lobby and thought to themselves, he's just not another ex-coach trying to make it as a broadcaster. They now saw him for what he could be. And that's how he saved his job. Second year, they put him with Gary Bender. He improved quite a bit because he had Gary most of the season. And he also had the same producer and director. But he still wasn't the John Madden we know and love. And then the third year, the boss sort of wanted to pair him with Scully because they were both West Coast guys. And he knew Scully from the Dodger games. Well, Scully liked to talk more than Madden. And the producer, Terry O'Neill, said, if you put them together, the viewer will be wrung out by halftime. And they came to a compromise. And Scully worked with Madden the first 4 games of the season. Summerall worked with Madden the second 4 games of the season. And on October 26th, all the executives got together, the CBS executives, and they voted, and they all voted unanimously for Summerall to be the play-by-play guy. And you could tell from the very first time they worked together, it was like peanut butter and jelly working, meeting for the first time. They just meshed perfectly. Madden started to relax. He told his stories and he knew when to get out, and he started to have fun. They even ended each other's sentences. And the thing was, Madden had tremendous respect for Summerall because here was another guy who had played the game. He had been an analyst. He had been a play-by-play guy, and he loved the game as much as John did. And together, they became one of the greatest teams of all time, if not the greatest.
The one line in the book, which I really think is just crafted so beautifully, is Madden liked to talk. Summerall majored in listening. Did it take you a long time to come up with that?
It just came right out of the computer. But it was so true. Summerall believed in brevity. And he learned that when he was an analyst working with Ray Scott doing play-by-play. Ray Scott was known for just being as brief as possible. And he would work for the Packers. He would call a touchdown play, star, dollar, touchdown. And that's all he needed. And he thought the pictures told the story. And Summerall learned from that. One of the executives said, if 10 words could tell a story, Pat could say it in 5. And that was perfect for John. And they were great together. Now, the odd thing was they were very friendly, but they didn't hang out off the field at all, while Summerall and Brookshier did all the time. They went their separate ways. And that, I think, helped make the partnership even better.
When I think of John Madden, Certainly you think of the boom and the pow, but also the telestrator. Without the telestrator, does John Madden become John Madden, the iconic broadcaster, without that telestrator?
He probably does anyhow, but it happened to fall in the lap of the CBS executive producer Terry O'Neill. Some weather people came up with it, and Madden had been always complaining to O'Neill that you guys don't show the game. You show 3 against 3 or 4 against 4. We never see why a play happened because we can't see 11 against 11. Well, the telestrator allowed him to do that and did it, and he did it in such a fun, iconic way that he became America's nutty professor.
And we often hear on broadcast today, well, during our production meeting, we talked to the coaches this week and some of the players. That was not a thing in the 70s. What gave Summerall, or I guess really Madden and Summerall, the confidence to say we should do this during the week before leading up to a game?
Before 1981, a producer director, the play-by-play guy, and the analyst would meet the day before the game with the two PR guys from the teams. They would get the three deep and the pronunciations of the tough names and who was injured, and then they'd all go out and party. And that was it. That was the preparation for the game, basically. Madden was claustrophobic, started taking the train to the games before the bus. And he would get there a couple of days early, and he would go to practice, and he'd start getting info from the coaches, and he'd talk to some of the players. And he and O'Neill went to Val Pinchback at the NFL, the head of media for the NFL, and said, we want access. 2 days before the game, we want to have production meetings with the coaches and the star players and get strategy and get inside stories. And that's the way that happened. And then when they collected all this information on in the beginning on Saturday night, O'Neill would whiteboard it for the rest of the crew and explain what plays were going to happen. And then a few years after that, when O'Neill left, Madden started to become a coach again, and he would have a film study for the whole crew and show them what plays were coming. And it was a new way to prepare for a game. It certainly was revolutionary, and it brought some incredibly fun stuff to the game.
They had such a great demeanor together. Was it always like that? Was it just like peanut butter and jelly, as you mentioned, on the air? Was it the same off the air?
Well, off the air, they weren't hanging out together. They would basically show up when it was time to do a production meeting or do the game. Summerall liked to hang out with the NFL executives or the team executives and have a steak dinner and some drinks. Madden liked to hang out with the crew. There was one example when they went to Washington, D.C. for a game. They get to the hotel, and there's a note from Madden from Ethel Kennedy, the widow of Robert F. Kennedy and the former brother of the president. And the note said, John, we're big fans of yours. We'd like to have lunch or dinner with you this weekend. And one of the kids, a kid named Mike Arnold, who is now the top director at CBS, he was kind of a young broadcast associate learning on the job. He said to John, geez, John, are you going to have dinner with Ethel Kennedy? And Madden looked at him for a second and said, nah, I'm going to have Mexican food with you guys. And that's how he was. He just loved people. He didn't like to hobnob at all. He just went his own way. And off the field, they went their separate ways, but they had tremendous love and respect for each other as partners.
Given this changing media landscape today, NFL games on YouTube and Prime and all these other places, NFL Network, Pat Summerall and John Madden in their prime, how would they have navigated all of this? Do you think they would have been jumping to other networks and things like that? Or would they have been with one home for as long as they could be?
I really don't know, but back when they became free agents, so to speak, when CBS lost the contract through stupid bidding against Mr. Murdoch and Fox. Excuse me. They became free agents, and especially John. John was getting offers from everyone, and he was loving it. So I think they probably would have gone to the network that not only treated them best, but offered them the most. And today, who knows? I would have never expected YouTube to be doing games 10 years ago, let alone now, along with Amazon and some of these other outlets.
Did you get any sense that Pat was, from your reporting, that Pat was ever envious or jealous of all the attention John got with the commercials and later the video game and everything else?
I got the sense that he wasn't jealous at all, and that he was happy for John, and that he really appreciated John getting all these accolades. John won 16 Emmy Awards. Pat won 0. But Pat got lots of other awards. He got the NFL Hall of Fame award. He was named Sportscaster of the Year 4 or 5 times. Pat Summerall, as John Madden said at his funeral, there were voices before Pat Summerall. There will be voices after him, but Pat was the voice of the NFL. He was the essence. When you heard his voice at 1:05 when he came on the air, you knew it was going to be a big game.
Madden and Summerall, how they revolutionized NFL broadcasting. Rich Podolsky, thank you so much for being on Sports Extra.
Don't forget to show the cover of the book. These people have to know what they're buying.